Hello, my name is Mike Billington. I'm the Education Program Manager at the Raptor Center, and this here is Alula, one of our resident red-tailed hawks. We're really thrilled to be here for your virtual experience, and what we're going to talk about today are this group of birds that we call raptors. What is the Raptor Center? What do we do? How are raptors different than other kinds of birds? Where you can find these birds out in the wild, because that's the best place to find them. Their story as to why they're with us permanently, and then a little bit about how people can inadvertently impact raptors and what we can do to help protect them. So let's start by talking about this red-tailed hawk. Raptors are a group of birds that go after their prey with their feet. They do not go after their prey with their beak. Their feet are called talons. They're sharp, they're powerful, they have sharp nails at the end, scales on their feet to protect themselves from being bitten or scratched when they go and catch their prey. Once they've got a hold of it and it's dead or near dead, look at that curved beak. They're going to use that curved beak to rip their prey into smaller bits and pieces. The other thing that really sets raptors apart from other birds, look at those eyes. This bird can see 2 times better than you can. What that means is if you could see as well as this red-tailed hawk and you went to the eye doctor, you would be able to see that little letter, let's say it's the letter E that we see at 20 feet, you'd be able to see it 40 feet away. And they're using that powerful vision to find their prey. So they use their large eyes to find their food, their powerful talons, they catch and grab it and hold on to it, and that curved beak to rip it into smaller bits and pieces. So those are the main characteristics of a raptor. And when you hear me say this word raptor today, I want you thinking hawks, like this red tail, eagles, owls, falcons, and vultures. So there's 5 main types. There's others, there's harriers and ospreys, but for this conversation today, eagles, hawks, owls, falcons, and vultures pretty much covers most of the raptors that you would see in your backyard. Now, when these birds get sick or injured, people, could be you could be your parents or the public, bring them to the Raptor Center, or sometimes they call the police and the police bring them to us. So they come in many different ways, but we get over 1,000 sick and injured raptors that we have to rehabilitate every year. Those birds come in with a wide variety of injuries. Hit by car is the most common. Sometimes they fly into glass. They don't know glass windows exist and they're chasing another bird and they go right into a glass window and that can be fatal. They can hit power lines, get electrocuted, sometimes they're shot, and sometimes they get into territorial fights and get into trouble themselves. But most of the time, the reason they come to the Raptor Center has something to do with people. And so the job of our veterinarians is to rehab these birds, first medically treat them, condition them. Oh, she's about to go to the bathroom here. Watch, her pail is gonna pop up, and there we go. Birds will go to the bathroom a lot of times right before they're gonna fly to lose a little bit of weight. Now, of the 1,000 sick and injured raptors that we receive every year, about 400 of them are able to be rehabbed and released back to the wild. The other, roughly 600, they just don't survive. And they come in with pretty bad injuries and it's really hard. There's certain injuries that we know we can't do anything for. Every once in a while, we get a bird in that has survived its injury, but it can't go back to the wild. So this red-tailed hawk, for instance, came in and she was starving to death. And we know she was starving because we could feel her keel bone. And there are 2 large muscles on either end of that keel bone that powers those wings. Well, there's very little muscle there, which means her body was needing food so badly that it was actually starting to digest her own muscle. And we started to feed her, give her fluids, got her healthy again. And so we started to fly her to get her back in condition for release back to the wild. And something very interesting happened. When she would fly in the same direction every time, off to the left. And that's because she's blind in her right eye. So we had a veterinary ophthalmologist, a doctor who specializes in eyes, came and checked her out and noticed her retina, the part of the eye that picks up light and color so we can see, was completely scarred over. And it was reminiscent of what you find with West Nile virus. So we took her blood, sent it off to the lab, and sure enough, it came back positive for West Nile virus. So a mosquito had bitten her at some point to draw blood. In that exchange, it passed the virus into her, and then that virus not only made her sick, but actually blinded her in her right eye. A lot of birds do not survive West Nile virus because of the damage it does to the eyes. Since she couldn't be released back to the wild, but otherwise she's totally healthy, so her body has now fought off the virus, we were able to change her role from being a predator out in the environment to being an educator. And so her job is to be an accurate ambassador of her species, red-tailed hawks, so you can see red-tailed hawks closer than you ever would in the wild. Now, at the Raptor Center, we have 33 permanently injured birds that we use for education, and so Alula is one of them. You're gonna get to see 3 others. So today we're gonna learn about hawks, we're gonna learn about falcons, owls, and eagles. All of these birds are wild animals, so don't let their calmness fool you. They're just trained to be around people. And so they know they're gonna be safe when they're on my glove, when they're around other people, but typically in the wild, they are really afraid of people because you guys and gals are actually really scary predators. Humans have eyes in front of their face. We send off predatory signals that we're gonna come and eat you, and these birds are the masters at reading body language. So when they see you, they know immediately you're a large predator and that you could try to eat them, and what are they gonna try to do? Fly away to protect themselves. Their #1 form of defense is flight. Use those powerful wings to get away. Red-tailed hawks are very common and can be found all over North America. They are incredibly good rodent specialists, and so in the wild, they're catching mice, rats, squirrels, chipmunks. They'll also go after waterfowl like ducks, wood ducks, mallards, things like that. And out on the farms, red-tailed hawks have gotten themselves a little bit of trouble, and their nickname is the chicken hawk. And that's because when a red-tailed hawk learns it can catch and eat chickens, and usually it's the smaller ones, not the adults, then you got a red-tail going after chickens. Typically, you find them along highways. And the reason for that is because when we make our highways, they're wide open spaces with nice tall perches. Those lamp posts or street signs are great perches for this bird to sit and look out of those wide open areas. And what is she looking for? Mice that are living in the grasses. Those grasslands are prime habitat for one of her main sources of prey, small mammals. Now, as big as this bird looks, do not let her size fool you. She weighs a whopping 3 pounds. That's it. These birds have to be light if they're gonna be good flyers and good hunters. Otherwise, they just wouldn't be able to get off the ground. They'd be too heavy. So the prey they're going after has to be pretty small. So right now, this bird is working really hard, and her motivation to work, be on my glove, and be a good ambassador bird is she gets chunks of rat. Oh, yummy. One last thing I want to show you about her. Raptors have 14 bones in their neck. Those extra bones act as an image stabilizer, so she can hold her head perfectly still, maximize those powerful eyes so she never loses sight of her prey. And not only that, whatever she's looking at stays clear and in focus. So she's looking at well-camouflaged mice that are pretty far away from her. Maybe they're 100, 200 feet away. And if her head was moving and just started to shake a little bit, and she started to lose the sight of her prey because of blurriness, that's just not gonna be an effective way for her to survive in the wild. So watch what she can do. If my arm was a branch, and that branch started to move in the wind, look at her head. She can hold it perfectly still, even when she's in motion. So imagine those wings are flapping up and down. While she's in flight, her head is perfectly still, so she can see her prey all the way to be able to grab it with her feet, tear it apart with that curved hook beak, and then she finds it with those powerful eyes. That's what makes this red-tailed hawk a raptor. Last but not least, how does she get her name? That rusty red tail. So if you see a pretty large bird with a cream belly, dark back, that rusty red tail, you know it's a red-tailed hawk. Let's get the next bird. Raptors come in all shapes and sizes. Do not let their size fool you. This is an American kestrel. Full-size adult. This bird is close to 10 years old and came to us when he was only 1, but was the same size. Had slightly different juvenile plumage. Most raptors in that first year have a juvenile plumage, so after they hatch out of the egg, that first year to the next summer, then they start to molt in their adult plumage. But birds, when they hatch out of the egg, they grow full size in the nest, and when they leave the nest, they don't get any bigger. So this bird isn't a baby falcon, full size, not gonna get any bigger. So some raptors are small and some raptors are big. Now, if you could hold this bird in your hand, he would weigh a whopping 110 paper clips. Remember, these birds gotta be light to be good flyers and good hunters. So first thing I want you to notice, of course, what makes this falcon a raptor? If I turn him, look at those talons. They're not very big, but they do the job of the prey he's going after in the wild. Typically flying insects, grasshoppers. This bird can track down dragonflies in midair, butterflies, moths, things like that. In addition to small insects or flying insects, they'll also go after small songbirds, house wrens, sparrows, birds like that, and they'll track them down in midair. So you are looking at the fighter jet of the bird world. Very thin and sleek, aerodynamic, long tail. You can see that bobbing tail. That's a classic sign of a kestrel. Other birds just don't do that. It's just something kestrels do, and we're not quite sure why. When they're comfortable, they bob their tail. When they're really excited, they bob their tail. When they're really hungry, they bob their tail. And when they're feeling nervous or scared, they bob their tail. So it's just a component, an aspect of being a kestrel. These birds have lots of personality. Now, in addition to catching small songbirds, they've also been seen in the wild catching birds as big as a robin, which is about as big as this bird is. So that's pretty impressive. In addition to small songbirds and insects, flying insects, they also go after mice, one of the few falcons that eat mammals, and they're very good mouse hunters. So they'll perch up in a branch or on a power line over grasslands, and they're typically looking straight down. But in addition to perching, they can also hunt in flight. They're one of the few birds that can hunt while they're hovering. So this bird can hover in place, both wings, you can imagine flapping like crazy. They're scanning the grasses for that mouse below them, and they're only 15 feet, 20 feet off the ground, and then they dive down and land on that mouse with their talons. They'll kill it with their feet, rip it apart with their beak, and they spot it, of course, with those eyes. Now, this bird's eyes, which are way smaller than yours, this bird can see about as well as you can, both color and detail, which is pretty amazing for an eye that's so small. Right now, you might notice his body feathers all puffed up. It's a little chilly out here today, and when birds want to keep warm, they puff their feathers up. Creates a little air barrier between their skin and their feathers, and that helps keep them warm. Birds do that, and they can live. Their feathers are such good insulators, they can live in Minnesota all year long. Most birds, however, take off in the fall and they head south. And what they're doing is they're following their food supply. But the birds like the chickadee, which you guys would definitely have up in northern Minnesota, the chickadee is excellent at living in Minnesota and getting the food it needs all year long, even though that bird is actually really, really small. It speaks to how incredible feathers are at keeping in warmth. That is called a rouse. It's how they fix up all their feathers. It's also behavior they do when they're really comfortable. So right now, this is a very comfortable kestrel looking all around, checking things out. Like the red tail, this bird also has those 14 bones in his neck, and watch how well he can stabilize his head. Now remember how I was saying he can hover in place? So as those wings are flapping like crazy, he can hold his head perfectly still so his head isn't blurring, his eyes aren't blurring, and see his prey crystal clear so he can go down and catch it. Now, see the polka dots on his belly? And let me turn his back to you a little bit. See those blue-gray wings? And then he's got brown on his back with black spots. Well, I know this is a male kestrel because those black polka dots on his belly and those blue-gray wings. There are 31 different species of raptors you can find around the Midwest, of which only 4, the males and females, have different colors, which means all 27 others, look identical. So that red tail, male and female perched next to each other, they look the same. But kestrels look different. Boys have that blue-gray wing, and if I had a girl perched on this hand, her wing would be the same color as his back. So their back and wings are all that kind of sienna brown with black speckling. Girls also have striping on their chest, not those nice polka dots. This bird came to us some sort of collision injury. We're not exactly sure what happened to him, and he has a wing injury. And so when we were flying him, he just couldn't fly strong enough to be able to effectively survive in the wild, so that's why that bird is with us permanently. The other thing he's showing you is how flexible that neck is. So he's got those 14 bones. Not only can he hold his head still if his body is moving, but he can also take his head and turn it 220 degrees in one direction. Owls, which we're going to see next, can take their head and turn it actually 270 degrees in one direction. So look straight ahead, over one shoulder, behind them, and look over their other shoulder, all while their body stays perfectly still. The next bird I've got for you is a great horned owl. Where do they get their name from? These giant feather tufts. And those feather tufts are not ears. Even though it looks like those are ears on the top of this bird, they're actually not. They're simply feathers. They help with her camouflage. They break up her body shape a bit when she's perched on a branch, but they don't help her with hearing. They help her with camouflage. Her ears, on the other hand, because owls have incredibly good hearing, are, so if you look at her eyes, those giant eyes, which I'm sure you noticed right away, go back a little bit, there's a black arching stripe behind her eye. So go to that stripe, and then down here, that's where her ears are. So they're not high on her head, they're actually low on her head. And if she'd let me, and she won't, here's the thing about raptors. They're solitary animals, they are predators, they catch and kill things out in the wild. They are not pets. They don't like to be touched, they don't like to be scratched, they like to be left alone. Now, she perches on my glove because she gets things of value for doing that. What's the motivation for this wild animal to stick around with me? Food. She learns that when she stays perched on the glove, this is a safe place. It's a place where also earns her food to eat. So raptors are not pets. They're not social. They don't like to be touched. They like to be left alone. And largely when they're out hunting, they're by themselves. Now, they will attract a mate. They will raise their chicks. But in the fall, when their chicks have left the nest, usually the male and female will go different directions and they'll go do their own thing. So I'm talking about raptors generally here. Touching them is not something they like. So we have to give them another reason for them to want to stay on the glove, be a part of this program, be willing participants in our mission of doing conservation through education. And so the motivation comes from food. That is her paycheck, some rat liver. Now, great horned owls have incredibly good hearing. This bird, there's a good chance that when she's looking at my chest on a quiet, if it were a quiet night, she might even be able to hear my heartbeat very, very subtly. So what we do know though, is if this bird was perched up in a tree, 20, 30 feet above the ground, it can hear a mouse under a foot of snow. Then when it flies, it can track down where that mouse is without ever seeing it, just using its ears, dive into the snow, grab that mouse with its talons. Now the other reason they can do that is they fly silently. Owls are your ambush predators. And if you look at her and think in your mind the shape of the kestrel and the hawk, both of them are aerodynamic, very sleek. The owl doesn't look like that, more bulky. The feathers are ultra soft. They don't need speed, they need stealth. And the way they get stealth is by flying ultra quietly. And what allows them to fly ultra quietly are those very soft feathers all over her body. Now, she flies so quietly that when she's flying down towards her prey, 30 feet above the ground, trying to catch a mouse under a foot of snow, the bird can hear that mouse because those soft feathers do such a good job of deadening the impact as it flies, that it knows exactly where that mouse is. Can triangulate, dive into the snow, and catch it with its feet. Now, great horned owls have very powerful talons. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna feed her a whole mouse. Now I'm gonna give it to her beak, but I want you to imagine she's got it at her feet, because in the wild, that's where her food's gonna be, right? She's gonna grab it with those talons. But I want you to see what it's like for a great horned owl to eat a mouse whole. So there she did, she turned it around and grabbed it by the head. Oh, there's the skull crunching, and down it goes. Owls will often eat their small prey like a mouse whole, and they'll eat it head first because it goes down very smoothly. They'll also bite on the head. The reason? They don't want to eat a live mouse and have it crawling back up their throat again. Oh, that'd be disgusting. Bite on the head, make sure it's dead, then eat it. So next time you go eat a mouse, learn from an owl how to do it. Now, That red-tailed hawk weighed 3 pounds. That American kestrel weighed 110 paper clips. This great horned owl weighs 3 pounds, just like the red-tail. But there's a big difference. Red-tails can catch small rabbits, young juvenile rabbits. This bird can catch adult rabbits, can catch skunks, groundhogs, mammals that can weigh up to 9 pounds. So they're very big, very strong for their size. Now they cannot fly away with a 9-pound skunk. It's way too heavy. So they gotta grab a part that they can rip off, fly into a tree to eat it. And what part's easy to rip off on a mammal? Basically the head. Raptors don't need to drink water. They get all the water they need from the food they eat. And what part of an animal is packed with water and nutrients? You got it, brains and eyeballs. Now, did you hear this part where I said she eats skunks? So here's the thing. Birds, generally speaking, have a very poor sense of smell. This bird's sense of smell is so poor that it can get sprayed full on in the face by a skunk and it won't bother them because it'll barely smell it. Catch them, kill it, eat it, no problem at all. Birds look big, but it's their feathers that make them look big. In fact, if I took this bird, put all of its feathers on a scale, and put all of its bones, its skeleton on the other side of the scale, the feathers would weigh more than the sum of its bones. That's how light the bones are. They're mostly hollow. They have a honeycomb structure to them for strength, but being hollow, then they're light. Now, great horned owls have a nickname of being tigers of the sky because they eat a wide range of mammals down on the ground, under 10 pounds, but they'll also go after other birds. They'll eat ducks, they'll eat waterfowl, they'll go after other birds in trees and nests, they'll go after other owls. So your great horned owl is very much a top of the food chain predator, an apex predator. Very similar to the last bird I'm gonna get out for you to see. Those bones in her neck allow her to take her head and turn it 270 degrees in one direction without moving her body. And just like the hawk and the falcon, she too can stabilize her head if her body is moving. Whether it's on a branch that's moving in a light breeze or whether or not she's flying, allows her to maximize those eyes. Now her eyes are gigantic, and what are they really good at doing? Catching little bits of light. We think of owls hunting at night. This owl can hunt into the night and fly around a forest, and her flashlight to get around and not hit anything is simply the stars. Starlight reflecting off of leaves and branches. But they're most active at dusk and dawn. And the word for that is crepuscular. So deer are crepuscular where they're most active at dusk and dawn. Great horned owls are. Now, us who are active during the day and dogs, we are diurnal. And then animals that are active at night are nocturnal. One last thing I want to show you about this owl. Her feet, her talons look different. They have feathers all the way to the tips of her toes. Again, that helps with that quiet flight. Softens those hard feet, so as they travel through the air, they're not making noises. The other thing is look at her body color. This bird lives in Minnesota all year round, even in the winter, and when leaves have fallen off trees, you would think they would stand out like a sore thumb, but they don't. They're a very common raptor, but we rarely see them because of their camouflage. You're very much looking at the masters of camouflage, and that's owls. Owls do a phenomenal job of blending into their environment, not only to hide from potential threats, but really to hide from their prey so their prey doesn't know that they're nearby. So this is the great horned owl. Her injury, before I forget, she fell out of the nest when she was a little chick. A person thought they were doing the right thing, went and found her, tried to take her home and raise her. Problem, people can't teach an owl how to be an owl. And since she never learned from her parents how to survive in the wild, what to hunt, where to hunt, what's a good territory, who to be territorial against, she just wouldn't survive in the wild, and so that's why she's with us permanently. And this is a bald eagle. This is a female bald eagle. And the reason I know it's a female and not a male is her size. Sorry guys, but in the world of raptors, it's the girls that are bigger than the boys. So if I had a male bald eagle perched on this arm, they would look the same. White head, yellow beak, white body, yellow feet, white tail. But the male would be about 1/3 smaller. So for as big as this bird looks, she only weighs about 10 pounds. A male would weigh about 7.5 pounds. So for raptors that look the same, the way we tell them apart is by their size. So we weigh them. Now sometimes you can get a larger male or a smaller female and there's kind of a a little bit of a gray area around the 8-pound range, where sometimes we don't know if it's a male or a female, and we'll just mark in their record unknown. Now, bald eagles are primarily fish specialists. And so when we think about those 3 characteristics of raptors, they really show up on her. So first, look at those feet, those talons. Underneath, they're very, very rough to catch and hold on to slippery, slimy fish. Look at those powerful feet to grab and hold on to that fish. And then look at that beak. That beak is really good at ripping fish into smaller bits and pieces. And last but not least, look at those eyes. So where the red-tailed hawk can see twice as well as you can, this bird can see 2.5 times better than you can. So if you could see like a bald eagle and go to the eye doctor, you'd be able to read those little letters 50 feet away. And that's really not the amazing part. If you had bones in your neck, like the hawk, the falcon, the owl, and the eagle, as you're moving, someone could be shaking you, and you'd be able to hold your head perfectly still to read those letters 50 feet away without any problem. Now, bald eagles, when they hatch out of the egg, they're all brown. So see that bright yellow beak? Brown. Head? Brown. Their body is brown, but it's got white speckling across it. And then let me lift her up so you can see that white tail is brown. The only thing that's yellow and doesn't change colors are her feet. Her feet are always yellow, and they'll stay yellow her whole life. So her first, second, and third year, she's pretty much all brown. Very dark beak in their first year, and then it starts to lighten up over time. Now when she turns 4, those white head feathers and white tail feathers start to molt in, but they molt in partially white, partially brown. Year 4 and year 5, they're growing in, having more white on them, and by the time they're about 6 years old, they've fully molted in that white head, they've fully molted in that white tail, and their beak, which started to change from brown to yellow at year 4, has fully changed by year 6. So it takes about 2 full years for bald eagles to transition from being a youngster, juvenile, to being an adult. Now, the hawk, the falcon, the owl, and the eagle all have large eyes, good vision, but their eyes are so big they cannot move their eyes in their head. So if you watch her, wherever she wants to look, she physically has to move her head to do so. Now, bald eagles are fish eaters, so where do you find them out in the wild? Next to lakes and rivers. They perch up in giant cottonwood trees and other large trees that you find near water, and they'll build their nest. And the thing about bald eagles' nests is they make a big nest because you can imagine mom and dad, now 2 or 3 chicks, which get to mom and dad's size in a couple of months, all living in that nest. It'll get filled up pretty quickly. So eagles, when they go to the bathroom, they're what I like to call shooters. They'll lift their tail up, and when they poop, they shoot it out 6 to 7 feet out of the nest. So one little bit of advice, if you ever see bald eagles, don't stand under their nest with your mouth open like, oh look, there's bald eagles in that nest. That could get disgusting quick. They do it because when they go to the bathroom, they do a lot, and if you've got 5 big birds all pooping in the nest together, that nest would be disgusting in a heartbeat. So even one of the first behaviors they do as a small chick is when they gotta go to the bathroom, they lift up that tail and they shoot it out. In the fall, when the chicks have left the nest, mom and dad typically will go. There are different ways as well. And then they'll come back to that nest in the spring. So bald eagles come back to the same territory, often year after year after year. And they recognize each other, and they reestablish their pair bond by working on the nest, doing home improvements, building it up. Bald eagles' nests, because of this, because they work on it year after year after year, have been known to get gigantic, where they've been nearly 9 feet deep, even though it's all full of branches. You know, it's only this deep at the top where there's actually a little divot where the birds perch, but 9 feet tall, weighing over 2,000 pounds, and have been known to actually take trees down because of how heavy they are. Now that's a nest that's been around for a long, long time. Now, bald eagles, in addition to eating fish, they'll also go after waterfowl because waterfowl live in the water as well. So it's easy prey that's near them. They'll also go after squirrels and rabbits, so, you know, not mammals that aren't too big. And her injury while her wings are open, that left wing, she was found during a winter storm. And what happened was, we think she got blown into a power line. She injured her elbow and was unable to fly. she was also suffering from lead poisoning. Every bald eagle that we get admitted to the Raptor Center, we test their blood for lead. And the reason for that is bald eagles scavenge on deer in the wintertime, and that's what keeps them in Minnesota all year long. The thing is, when we go hunting deer, we often use lead rifle bullets. Those lead bullets, when they hit the deer, fragment, sending little shards of fragments throughout the body, and a lot of times into the gut pile, into the guts. Hunters will take out the guts and leave a gut pile behind, which is easy food for a bald eagle. The problem is it's contaminated with fragments of lead. At 10 pounds, all this bird needs to ingest of lead to be fatal is take an aspirin tablet, break it in half. A half an aspirin tablet is enough to be fatal to an eagle of this size. Hunters are one of our main conservation groups. And so learning about the impact of lead on eagles isn't trying to take away from hunting. It's just trying to teach us that bald eagles are being inadvertently impacted by the ammunition we use when hunting. So things we can do to help protect bald eagles: we can pack out gut piles, throw them away. You can try to bury them, but that might be hard depending on if the ground is frozen or not. Or you can use non-toxic ammunition. So lead is toxic to people as well. And so a non-toxic version of hunting ammunition would be copper bullets, for instance. Copper, even if you ingested a fragment, it's non-toxic, so it wouldn't hurt you, not like an ingested fragment of lead would. Now, bald eagles have that nice white head, and if you look at the head, she's got feathers on her head, she's not bald. The word bald, when Europeans first arrived, the word meant white, and they were really saying the white eagle. Well, the meaning for bald changed over time, but the bald eagle name didn't, so that's where they got their name from. Now, the story of the bald eagle is really a tremendous success story, because when Europeans first arrived, there were over 500,000 nesting pairs of bald eagles, but by 1970, that population had plummeted to only about 400 nesting pairs south of Canada. There was a pesticide that was developed called DDT. It was really good at killing insects and didn't seem to harm people or animals. The problem is it didn't break down in the environment. And DDT, because it didn't break down in the environment, would get into the food chain and accumulate as bigger predators ate bigger predators up to bald eagles. So imagine fish. Little fish get a little bit of DDT in them, are eaten by slightly bigger fish, and they eat a bunch of those smaller fish. And then a slightly bigger fish eats that fish, and then finally a bigger fish comes along and eats that fish, concentrating the DDT chemical up the food chain, eventually to the top, where bald eagles would catch that fish, eat it, get enough DDT exposure that it would actually interfere with how their body processed calcium. And what does a female eagle need? A lot of calcium to make, year after year after year? Eggs. And so bald eagles weren't reproducing because their eggshells were too thin and compromised because of DDT. DDT was banned in '72. The bald eagle was put on the endangered species list in '73, and then it recovered by 2007. It was taken off the endangered species list. It really is a tremendous success story of what happens when we come together to protect eagles, their environment, so they have access to clean food, clean water, and large, big trees and healthy habitats to live in. You guys are the future. You're going to be making decisions that all of these birds you see today are going to rely on. How we use resources to protect the environment, provide healthy habitats. All of these animals are going to rely on having access to healthy habitats to survive. And it's going to be up to us to make the decisions to make sure those habitats are available. Well, I want to thank you so much for watching us today, learning a bit about raptors that you find here in Minnesota. So the Raptor Center is on the St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. And with that, I'd like to say goodbye. And if you ever get the chance to visit us, feel free. When we're open to the public, currently we're closed to COVID, but we're located by the State Fair in St. Paul. We're right across the street from the College of Veterinary Medicine. Thank you so much and have a great day.